All right, today we are going to practice basic English. We are going to uh, explore and learn some basic to intermediate level English vocabulary. And we're going to do this reading this book, which is called, this is chapter one, reading chapter one of this book, which is called The Children's Book of London. So it's written for children, therefore the language is pretty basic, and it's explaining the city of London to in a way that children could understand it. Okay, so it should be pretty easy to understand, although there are some interesting vocabulary words which are a little bit more intermediate, but that's okay. We can we can learn some new vocabulary that way. So we'll find interesting words and phrases, and we will stop and we will practice using them so that you can improve your vocabulary. And we'll use special exercises that will also help you to improve your listening and speaking abilities. And sometimes we will look for the definition of words, or we will look at pictures to explain what certain words are. So we're not just going to read, we're going to read and then talk about it. And if you're watching live with me, then please write in the comments if you have a question. If you want to look at something again, we can go back and look at it if I see your comment. All right, so if you're a beginner or you're intermediate, this is great for improving your vocabulary. Even if you're a little bit more advanced, it's still a good way to improve your fluency and accuracy because we will be doing some exercises. This is chapter one, and the title is London Children. London Children. And the book was published in 1922, copyright free. That's why I'm using it. So if you're in London, maybe you can tell me if this is still pretty accurate, a pretty accurate description of the children. Okay, so let's start reading. Chapter 1, London Children. To begin with, the streets of London are not paved with gold. Do you know pavement is like the top cover of a street or a sidewalk? And then, so when they say that the streets are paved with gold, that's a saying. I didn't know that they said it about London. I think they used to say it about New York. But what that means, well, actually, I bet we could find a picture of that, paved with gold. So just think of pavement as the road or the sidewalk. It's really the top covering. Let's see, paved with gold. Let's just see if we can find a picture of that. So you can imagine, it's an expression. And what it means is that if you go to this place, you'll be rich, or it's a wonderful place to be. When they say the streets are paved with gold, that means the streets are covered. The top of the street is covered in gold, like it's the most wonderful place in the whole world. It's a pretty common expression, actually. Oh, wait, let's go. Now I've lost my book. Okay. It was so let's start again. So to begin with, the streets of London are not paved with gold. So they're saying it's not the most wonderful place in the world. Even if that's what people tell you, it's not true. So that's a lovely way to start the book, don't you think? But I need not have said that, for nowadays the very youngest child knows it. It was Dick Whittington who first imagined anything so foolish. I didn't know who Dick Whittington was, and I had to look it up. So we might as well just take a look at this for a minute. Who's Dick Whittington? See, look, this is Wikipedia. Dick Whittington and his cat. So Dick Whittington was a person who was born like 700 years ago. and he became the Lord Mayor of London. So I guess he was the first person to say that London's streets were paved with gold, which means it's a wonderful city where you can become rich, or things are magical there, something like that. So it was Dick Whittington who first imagined anything so foolish, anything so stupid, anything so ridiculous as that. All right. Let me. Whoops. Sorry, I've got to get. I've got too many windows open. Let me try this again. Okay. So it was Dick Whittington who first imagined anything so foolish. But then he was only a country lad. And maybe you don't know this, but lad is just another word for boy. So he was a country boy. And in his days, there was not the same opportunities for finding out the truth about things as there are now. There were very few books, for one thing. And those that there were, cost a great deal of money. So now we come to the first phrase that I would like to practice, which is a great deal of. A great deal of. And this is just another way of saying a lot. It's very common. You'll see this all the time. A great deal of. And it just means a lot. That's all. So let's practice using this just for a minute. What is the opposite of expensive? Do you know the opposite of expensive? Cheap. Cheap. So if I make a sentence, books were cheap. Books were cheap. Books were cheap. How will you ask a yes-no question with books were cheap? How do you make a question with that? A yes-no question. Were books cheap? Were books cheap? Okay, and let's answer cheap no, expensive yes. So no, books weren't. No, books weren't cheap. No, books weren't cheap. Books were expensive. No, they weren't cheap. They were expensive. Okay, now what is another way to say expensive or a lot of money? How would you say a lot of money using a great deal of? Books were a great deal of money. Books were a great deal of money. Books weren't cheap. They were a great deal of money. They were a great deal of. They were a great deal of money. Books weren't cheap. They were a great deal of money. All right, let's try another sentence. Books were free. Books were free. How will you make a yes-no question with that sentence? Books were free. Were books free? Were books free? Let's say free no, expensive yes. No, they weren't. No, they weren't free. No, they weren't free. They were expensive. No, they weren't free. They were expensive. What's another way to say expensive or a lot of money? A great deal of. A great deal of money. Books were a great deal of money. No, they weren't free. They were a great deal of money. Okay, let's try one more. Books were common. Remember, we're talking 700 years ago. Books were common. How will you make a yes-no question with that sentence? Books were common. That means available everywhere. You can find them everywhere. Were books common? Were books common? No, they weren't common. What is the opposite of common? Rare. Books were rare. No, books weren't common. They were rare. I don't know why I put that one. It doesn't practice a great deal of. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I got distracted. Okay, well, that's a great deal of. A great deal of means a lot. Let's just go back to the book here. It says, there were very few books, for one thing. So there were not a lot of books. And those that were cost a great deal of money. So there weren't many books, and the books were very expensive. They cost a great deal of money, a lot of money, and would hardly be likely to come in Dick's way. So that if there was by chance a book which described London as it was then, it is not at all probable that he would have seen it. There were no photographs either to show him what London was really like. So of course, he had to make up ideas. Okay, now this is the next thing that I want to practice with you today, and that is the phrasal verb make up, which is very common. Make up, it means invent or create. So when you see make up, those two words together, not always, but most of the time, it means invent or create. So he had to create stories. He had to invent stories. Let's practice using make up in sentences, okay? Here's a sentence. He invented stories about Paris. He created stories about Paris. What is another way that you can say invent or create? Make up. He created stories about Paris. He made up stories. He made up stories about Paris. We can also say he made stories about Paris up. Or let's do it like this. He made stories up about Paris. He made stories up about Paris. Okay, can you make a yes/no question with that sentence? He made stories up about Paris. He made stories up about Paris. Did he? Did he make? Did he make up? Did he make up stories? Did he make up stories about Paris? Did he? Did he? Did he make up? Did he make up stories about Paris? Did he make up stories about Paris? Let's answer Paris. No. No. No, he didn't. No, he didn't make up stories. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't make up stories. No, he didn't make up stories about Paris. He didn't invent stories about Paris, create stories about Paris. Can you make a which city make up stories question? That's pretty hard. Which cities? Which city? Sorry, which city? Which city did he make up stories? Which cities did he make up stories about? Okay, and let's answer London. He made up, he created, he invented, he made up stories. He made up stories about London. Okay, let's try another example of using the phrasal verb make up, which means create or invent. Here's another sentence. He created stories about his friends. What is another way to say create? Make up. So let's change the sentence. We have he created stories about his friends. Let's use make up. He made up. He made up stories. He made up stories about his friends. About his friends. About his friends. He made up stories about his friends. Another way that you can say this is he made stories up about his friends. He made stories up about his friends. He made up stories about his friends. Okay, now let's make a yes/no question with this sentence. Did he make up? Did he make up stories? Did he make up stories about his friends? Let's say no. No, he didn't. No, he didn't make up. No, he didn't make up stories. No, he didn't make up stories about his friends. No, he did not make up stories about his friends. Let's make a who about question. Who did he make? Who did he make up stories about? Who did he make up stories about? Okay, let's say people in the street. People in the street. He made up he made up stories. He made up stories about people in the street. He made up stories about people in the street. All right. So now if we go back and we take a look at how they use makeup here, he had to make up ideas about it himself. So he was just imagining London, but he didn't have any books or pictures to help him. So he had to create, he had to invent, he had to make up ideas about it himself. All right, let's get rid of this and let's keep going here. Just as you, who live in the country and have heard people talking about London, do now. So this book is a book that wants to explain or describe London to children because it's a children's book. But these are children who live in the country and they've never visited London. Are the stories you invent? Are the stories you invent at all like the stories Dick Whittington made up for himself? So are the stories that you create about London the same as the stories that Dick Whittington made up about London? You can't answer because you're not writing this book, so I must answer for you. Perhaps you think London is a place where there are no lessons to do. So they're saying perhaps you think that if you live in London, you don't have to go to school. And where there is always a great deal of fun going on. Remember, we just practiced that phrase, a great deal. It means a lot. There's a lot of fun happening. Where you can go to see the sights all day long. A huge waxwork, the huge waxwork figures at Madame Tussauds. Well, I guess, do you know what that is? That's in a lot of cities now, Madame Tussauds, but it's I don't understand the appeal of it, to be honest with you. But it's something in most major cities around the world where they make statues or they make images of people. Whoops. Using wax, so they look very realistic. Why are they only showing one person here? So this, even though this is written 100 years ago, they have this museum where they make images of famous people from wax. Okay. So that's why it says the huge waxwork figures at Madame Tussauds, as big as real people. Probably that was more impressive 100 years ago. And the lions and tigers and elephants and bears at the zoo. And you think that the boys and girls who live in London spend all their time seeing wonderful things. All right. Now, it's very common to use this phrase to spend time. And when you use spend in this way, it's about how you pass the time or how you use the time. The boys and girls in London spend their time seeing wonderful things. That's how they pass their time. That's how they use their time. Let's practice using this phrase, spend time, a little bit. Let's say they, the children, they spend their time seeing wonderful things. How would you make a yes/no question with that sentence? They spend their time seeing wonderful things. Can you make a yes/no question? Do they? Do they spend their time? Do they spend their time seeing? Do they spend their time seeing wonderful things? Do they spend their time seeing wonderful things? Oh wait, let's put that up here. Where is it? Spend time. Okay, do they spend their time seeing wonderful things? How do you answer no? No. No, they don't. No, they don't spend their time. No, they don't spend their time seeing wonderful things. Let's make a how question. How spend time? How? How do they? How do they spend? How do they spend their time? How do they spend their time? Let's answer with studying. They don't spend their time seeing wonderful things. They spend their time studying. They don't spend their time seeing wonderful things. They spend their time studying. Let's try another example using spend time. The boys and girls of London spend their time at the zoo. How will you make a yes/no question with that sentence? The boys and girls of London spend their time at the zoo. Let's say they, not the boys and girls of London. Do they? Do they spend their time? Do they spend their time going to the zoo? Or let's say at the zoo, sorry. Do they spend their time at the zoo? Do they spend their time at the zoo? Answer no. No. No, they don't. No, they don't spend their time. No, they don't spend their time at the zoo. Make a where question. Where spend time? Where? Where do they? Where do they? Where do they? Where do they spend? Where do they spend their time? Where do they spend their time? And the answer is at school. They spend their time at school. They spend their time at school. They spend their time at school. They don't spend their time at the zoo. They spend their time at school. All right, let's take this down. Again, as I'm reading, if you see something that I don't mention, that I fail to mention, just ask in the chat. And if I see it, I'll be happy to stop and talk about whatever word or phrase you see. Okay, so if this is what you think, if you think the children of London are always at the zoo or in the park having a wonderful time, if this is what you think, some of it is true enough. Some of it's true. There are a great many wonderful things to be seen in London. If you want to hear about them at once, you must skip all this chapter and a great many others besides and go on to page 241, where you will find them described. So I guess the first part of this book, they will talk about life in London. And then later in the book, they will talk about interesting things that you can see in London. But if you want to know what London itself is really like, you must wait a little longer. The best people to tell you would be the children who live in London. They will read this book, and of course, they could answer all of your questions. But they will not all answer in the same way. Some would say, oh yes, of course, we all know the zoo, but that's for small children. We are quite tired of a dull place like that. So now we have this word dull. And this is another word for boring. Let's practice using the word dull, which means boring. So the older children complain that they think the zoo is dull. They think the zoo is boring. The older children think the zoo is for little children and is boring. They think it's dull. Let's practice the word dull. Here's a sentence. The zoo is an exciting place for older children. Can you make a yes/no question with that sentence? The zoo is an exciting place for older children. That's a pretty long sentence. The zoo is an exciting place for older children. Make a yes/no question. Is the zoo an exciting place? Is the zoo an exciting place for older children? Is the zoo an exciting place for older children? Let's say exciting place, no. Boring place, yes. So 2 sentences. Exciting place, no. Boring place, yes. No, the zoo isn't an exciting place. The zoo isn't an exciting place for older children. It's a boring place for older children. The zoo's not an exciting place for older children. It's a boring place for older children. What is another word for boring? Dull. Let's change the sentence using dull. No, the zoo isn't an exciting place for children. It's a dull place for older children. It's a dull place for older children. Okay, let's make another sentence. The museum is interesting for younger children. The museum is interesting for younger children. How will you make a basic yes/no question with that sentence? The museum is an interesting place for younger children. Is the museum interesting? Is the museum an interesting place for younger children? Let's answer interesting, no. Dull, yes. Dull means boring. No, it's not interesting for younger children. It's boring for younger children. It's dull for younger children. No, it's not interesting for younger children. It's dull for younger children. Okay, let's take this down. So we are quite tired of a dull place like that, referring to the zoo. We're quite tired of the zoo. It's dull. It's boring. Okay, where everyone goes, we like balls. Now a ball is a big party. Well, I don't really think that, but yeah, I guess people still have balls. It was more common, I think, 100 years ago to have a ball. A ball is like a big fancy party. So these children say, we don't like, the London children, the rich London children say, we don't like zoos. That's boring. That's dull. We like balls, which means we like big, fancy, expensive parties where everyone goes, with good floors for dancing and programs and everything done as it is at grown-up balls. Okay, now this word grow up or grown up means big, but it means like mature big. It means like it's kind of the opposite of child. So grow up means adult. And so adult balls means adult parties, like fancy adult parties. Let's practice using this phrasal verb grow up. It's not grow. Grow means become big, but grow up means to change from a child to an adult. So you almost only use this phrasal verb grow up when you're talking about people or perhaps animals. It means like going from a baby to going to an adult. Let's practice using it. Here is a situation. Mark was born in New York. So he was a baby in New York, and then he lived there until he was an adult, until he was 18. We can communicate all of this by using grow up. Mark grew up in New York. There are a lot of vowel sounds in that. Grew up. Grew up. Mark grew up in New York. Mark grew up in New York. He changed from baby to adult in New York. How will you make a yes/no question with Mark grew up in New York? Mark grew up in New York. Did Mark, did he grow up? Did he grow up in New York? How can you answer no to that question? No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't grow up. No, he didn't grow up in New York. Can you make a where grow up question? Where? Where did he? Where did he grow up? 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 And the answer is London. He didn't grow up in New York. He grew up in London. He did not grow up in New York. He grew up in London. He didn't grow up in New York. He grew up in London. Okay, now let's practice with another example using grow up, which means changing from a child or a baby to an adult, becoming big in that way. Lisa was born in Los Angeles and she changed from a baby to an adult. She became a teen in Los Angeles. In other words, she grew up in Los Angeles. She changed from baby to adult in Los Angeles. Oh, I forgot to put it up here. That would help. Okay, Lisa grew up in Los Angeles. How will you make a basic yes-no question with that sentence? Did she? Did she grow up? Did she grow up in Los Angeles? Did she grow up in Los Angeles? And how will you answer no to that question? No. No, she didn't. No, she didn't grow up. No, she didn't grow up in Los Angeles. Can you make a where grow up question? Where? Where did she? Where did she grow up? Let's answer London. She grew up in London. She didn't grow up in Los Angeles. She grew up in London. She didn't grow up in Los Angeles. She grew up in London. All right. Let's keep reading here. So let's see. The older children complain, oh, we don't like zoos. Zoos are for little babies. They're for little children. Zoos are boring. What's another word for boring? Dull. Zoos are dull. We like big fancy parties, like grown-ups, like adults, with dancing and good food, just like adults. We like theaters, where we can sit in the front row and look through opera glasses and eat ices. Should we look up opera glasses? I'll show you what opera glasses are. So these are little children talking, and they're I guess they're pretty sophisticated, or at least spoiled. These are opera glasses. These are little kids talking. It's kind of funny. Madame Tussauds? Yes, it's there still. We went to it when we were quite little babies, but it's not at all fashionable. So, in other words, it's not cool to go to Madame Tussauds Wax Museum anymore. And another child might say, I don't mind driving with mother in the... I'm not sure what this means, row. Maybe that's a place. I don't really know. I don't mind driving with mother in the row when I'm really beautifully dressed. I don't know what that means. But I'll tell you a secret about the little boys and girls who talk like this. They're not really children at all. They never have been and never will be. They are grown-up men and women in child shapes. And by the time their bodies have grown big, they won't enjoy anything at all. So the author is saying these children who are not having fun in a child's way will probably be very unhappy when they're older. They should enjoy being young. But they're too busy trying to act like adults, even though they're children. Master Augustus will be a dull young man. So here we have the word dull again. Remember, that means boring. So the little child, Augustus, the little boy, Augustus, will be a boring young man who hates everybody and does not know how to get through the long, dreary day. A dreary day is like a sad, dark, depressing, rainy day. And Miss Ruby will be a mere heartless woman who only cares to please herself and does not mind how unhappy she makes everyone else. And all this will be because of their foolish father and mother. Let them have everything they wanted and allowed them to go everywhere they liked. Well, it sounds like maybe children with a lot of money 100 years ago in London were not very likable. Because it seems like the author is complaining about these kids. Okay, let's see. And allowed them to go everywhere they liked. And that, by the way, when you give a child everything they ask for, when you never say no to a child, that's called spoiling a child. And that word spoil means ruin, which is true because by the time they become an adult, they're ruined. They never hear the word no, and suddenly when they're an adult, they can't handle it if you tell them no. So that's what the author is saying. These children are spoiled little children. Allowed them to go everywhere they liked, and that is not at all good for even a grown-up people. Remember, grown-up means adult. So that's not even good for adult people. If you never say no to adults, it's just as bad as if you never say no to a child. There are, however, many other sorts of children in London, and it is rather interesting to hear what they think of the town in which they live. For instance, there are the children of people who are not at all poor, who have nice houses and plenty of money, but who are yet sensible enough to know that their children must have something else besides pleasure. The author first describes these children who must be very rich and can do whatever they want. And now the author is talking about people who also have money, but they're more sensible, and they don't always give their children what they want, and they make them study, and they give them discipline. If we asked one of their children what he thought of London, he might say, "I've seen the zoo, of course, and Madame Tussauds, and I've been to Maskelyne's Mysteries," whatever that is, and the Hippodrome, and they're all jolly. Jolly means fun or happy or good, especially the zoo. But those things generally happen in the holidays. We don't have such fun every day. A boy or a girl of this sort has really a much duller time. Remember dull? They keep using that word. That means boring. So these boys and girls, their time is more boring than the ones who live in the country. London is so big, so huge, that he only sees a wee bit of it. So let's practice using a wee bit, which is another way of saying a little. Remember we had earlier, the first phrase that we had was a great deal of something, which means a lot. And let me put this here. A little. But now we have an interesting phrase that means a little. So you can say a great deal of something, that means a lot, or a wee bit means a little. Let's just practice using a wee bit, which means a little. Let me get rid of this. All right, so here's a sentence, which is, learning English is difficult. How will you make a basic yes/no question with this idea? Learning English is difficult. Is learning English difficult? And how will you answer no? No. Learning English. No. Learning English is not. No, learning English isn't difficult. You just need a little patience. You just need a little patience. What is another way to say a little? A wee bit. You just need a wee bit of patience. A wee bit of patience. You just need a wee bit of patience. No, learning English isn't difficult. You just need a wee bit of patience. Okay, let's try another example using a wee bit, which means a little bit, a little. Mark and Lucy visited London, but they could only stay for 2 days. Here is a sentence. They saw a lot of the city. And what is another way to say a lot of? A great deal of. They saw a great deal of the city. Can you make a basic yes/no question with that sentence? They saw a great deal of the city. Did they? Did they see? Did they see a great deal of? Did they see a great deal of the city? Did they see a great deal of the city? How would you answer no? No. No, they didn't. No, they didn't see. No, they didn't see a great deal of the city. No, they didn't see a great deal of the city. Let's say they only saw a little bit of the city. They only saw a little bit of the city. They only saw a wee bit. They only saw a wee bit of the city. They didn't see a great deal of the city. They only saw a wee bit of the city because they only stayed for 2 days. They didn't see a great deal of the city. They saw a wee bit of the city. A wee bit. That just means little. A little bit. Okay. London is the capital town of England, as everyone knows. In Dick Whittington's time, it was not very big, but it has grown and grown until it is 17 miles in one direction and 12 in another. You know what a mile is, perhaps. Well, try to imagine 17 miles, one after another, end to end, on and on, all streets of houses, with here and there a park, very carefully kept. When they say the park is very carefully kept, that means they're very careful about the way the park looks. So everything it looks very nice and very clean and very neat. That's what it means when they say the park is very carefully kept. Not in the least like a country park. So if you imagine a park in the country, maybe it doesn't look so clean or so with a lot of order to it, more chaos. And all these streets and streets of houses are not very interesting. And in many of them, the houses are all alike, built of dull colored stone. How many times are they going to use the word dull? I'm glad I chose that as a vocabulary word. Boring colors. So, if you think about the houses in London, they all have like the red brick, and that's it. That's why they're saying it's a dull colored. It's not very colorful. You don't see blue and pink and yellow. It's all red. Or else they are covered with plaster. This is a great part of London where people only go to work and from which they come away again at nights. In the mornings, hundreds and hundreds of men pour into this part as fast as the trains can bring them. Now, if you're kind of a beginner, maybe even intermediate, it's possible you don't know that word pour. And if you looked it up in a dictionary, it would probably show you something like this, pour. Pouring is when you transfer liquid. So let me show you a picture of pour. Oops. So here, someone is pouring wine, pouring water. It's when liquid changes from one place to another with your hand usually. So pouring tea, just the transfer of liquid, pouring coffee, pouring milk. Now, but they're using it kind of in an interesting way in this paragraph, because what he says, where did it go? There's a great part of London where people only go to work, and from which they come away again at nights. In the mornings, hundreds and hundreds of men pour into this part as fast as the trains can bring them. So you can imagine like a flood of water going into a part of the city, and that's what it looks like. All the people going in the morning to go to work. They pour into the city as fast as the trains can bring them, and go to their office and go to their offices, which are in great buildings, many different offices being in one building. And the streets are filled with men hurrying this way and that. This way and that means going in all different directions. So, hurrying this way and that, you can imagine people going in many different directions. Always in a hurry. There's no standing about or idling. Idling means standing and doing nothing. So idling is just standing there. Idling means doing nothing. So there is no idling. You won't see any people just standing there. Everybody's walking around doing something. Omnibuses and carts and cabs. By the way, cab just means taxi. And taxi is kind of like a universal word. You could go to any country and say taxi, and people will know the word. But the word cab is just as common in English. Most people will say, call a cab, take a cab, and that means take a taxi. Omnibuses and carts and cabs are all mixed up together in the roadway until you would think it was impossible for them to ever be disentangled. We're not going to practice this word disentangled. That's a little bit too fancy for basic English, but let's look at tangle for a minute. Tangle is when, it's the name of a toy, so it's also the name of a movie. Gosh, let's try something else here. Everything is the name of a movie now, so if you look it up, you don't get accurate pictures. You get covers of DVDs. So this is tangled. It's when you have a lot of things together like this. So disentangled means, taking it apart. Like here you could say that this guy is disentangling the string. He's taking it apart, trying to organize it in a better way. So on the left you have tangled, and then on the right you have disentangled. How do they use it in the paragraph? Let's see. So they said that there's no one standing about or idling. Omnibuses and carts and cabs are all mixed together in the roadway, all tangled, until you would think it was impossible to ever disentangle them. Like you can't separate them anymore. And now and then some bold man on a bicycle dares to ride right into the middle of it all, between the wheels and under the horses' noses, and how he ever gets through without being crushed up as flat as a paper knife is a wonder. At nights, when the men have done their day's work, and they're in as much of a hurry to get out of that part of London, which is called the city, as they were to get into it in the morning, they go by cabs. Remember, a cab is like a taxi, and omnibuses and trains back to their homes and their children. And the city is left still and silent, with just a quiet cat flitting across the street and making a frightened jump when a big policeman turns on his lantern. So the policeman turns on the light, it scares the cat. The children of rich people seldom see this part of London. Seldom means not very often. So the rich children don't often see this part of London. Perhaps their father goes there every day, and they hear him talk of the city. But it is like another town to them, so vague and far away, it seems. These children probably have lessons with their governess at home, and when 12 o'clock comes, they go for a walk. When they open the front door, they see a long street stretching both ways. Oh wow, what happened? I disappeared. How did I disappear? What's going on? I didn't realize my picture disappeared. How did that happen? Oh well. I guess you can't see me. Sorry. I don't know how to fix it. I don't want to waste time. Okay, I'm going to be invisible for the rest of the for the rest of the time. What happened? No, I'm completely gone. Okay, well, oh well. The street pavement is made of wood, which is quieter than stones, and when the cabs run past, they make very little sound. If the children are lucky, they live in a square, and there is a garden in the middle of the iron railings round it. And everyone who lives in the square has a key to open it. You know what? Wait, maybe if I can... Here. I can do the... Okay, so if the children are lucky, they live in a square, and there is a garden in the middle with iron railings round it, and everyone who lives in the square has a key to open the gate. But it must not be left open, or other people would get in and use the garden too. It has green grass in it and flower beds, and it's still very prim and proper. That means that they're very careful about keeping it. So it looks very clean and very nice. Everything is very organized. And not at all interesting. And worst of all, the dear dogs, Scamp and Jim, cannot go there, even when they are led by a string. So dogs are not permitted in these parks. That's kind of interesting. The gardener would turn them out, so that if somebody tried to take a dog into one of these parks, the gardener, the person in charge of making sure that the park is very nice, would refuse to let them in, make them go away. They would kick about in his flower beds and rake out the seeds, so they would ruin his hard work if they permitted dogs into the park. This is not the sort of garden that a country child would care for. So a country child would not like this garden. But Jack and Ethel are not country children, and they are quite used to their garden and like it very much. But the children who grow up in London around these parks, they don't know what it's like to be in a country park. They have nothing to compare it to. So they love their parks. They don't know what they're missing. We can see them start on their morning walk with Miss Primity, their governess. Both the children wear gloves. They never go out without them. And in the street, they walk quietly. But when they have passed down the street and got into Hyde Park or Kensington Gardens, they can run about as much as they like. In the gardens, there's a big round pond where Jack can sail his boat, and on Saturdays, the water is covered with white sails. Oh, let me just find a picture of that. What they're describing, you can see this now, I think, in a lot of cities, but or at least in New York. I don't know if they do it in other places, but this is kind of a popular way for some people to spend time. I've never done it, but they're talking about having these like toy boats in a lake and having races and things like that with these. And the part that goes up, that's the sail. These are sail boats. And the fabric is the sail. The boats are quite often large, and the scene is very gay. Gay just means happy. The scene is very gay and pretty, means the scene is very happy and pretty. There are a great many ducks, which clamor to be fed, and there are other children there too. These may be friends of Jack and Ethel's. And they can play together, and Ethel can show her new doll, and Jack can boast of all the things he means to do when he grows up. The gardens are very nice, but it is rather dull. There's that word again, dull, which means boring. Always having the same walk in the same place every day. And sometimes the children get a little tired of it and are glad when a half holiday comes and an aunt or uncle carries them off to see some of the wonderful things of which London is full. There is another part of London of which we have not yet spoken. We have heard of the city and of the West End, the city where businessmen work, and the West End where rich people live. But there is also the East End, lying beyond the city, and the people who live here are nearly all poor. If you asked any of the children of the East End if they had seen Madame Tussauds or the zoo, they would grin and say, "Gone." And if you told them about these things, they might say, "You're kiddin', you're," which is their way of saying they don't believe you and think that you're telling stories. So if you go to the East End where the children are poor and you say, "Oh, have you seen the Wax Museum? Have you gone to the zoo?" They wouldn't even believe that this place exists. They would think that you're lying to them because they have no idea about this kind of place. In the streets where these children live, everything is dirty and nasty. Nasty means like disgusting or horrible. And a number of families live together in one house, or perhaps even in one room. For I have heard of rooms where each family had a corner. The women never do anything more than they can help. So they're saying the women are very lazy. And they never wash themselves. They never take baths. Or their children. They never wash their children. Or try to cook nicely. They do nothing. They spend the day sitting on their dirty doorsteps with the youngest baby on their knees. And their hair is all uncombed. If you don't know what the word comb is, let's just take a look at the word comb for a minute. This is what a comb is. That's a comb. So now let's take a look at uncombed hair. Then it will make sense to you. Okay, maybe trying to find a good example of this. These are all people that look like they're doing it on purpose. Okay, maybe this guy. So this is uncombed hair. It means he didn't comb his hair. Uncombed hair. So that's what they're saying. The women, they don't take baths, and their hair is uncombed. They don't comb their hair. And their dresses are filthy and torn. Filthy is another word for dirty. Their dresses are very dirty. Filthy means extremely dirty. So their dresses are extremely dirty and torn. And they shout. They shout out to other women across the street and make remarks on anyone who happens to pass. The poor little baby gets dreadful things to eat. All right. So the word dreadful means horrible. It's another word for horrible. Let's practice using this word dreadful. Here is a situation. Lucy and John went to a new restaurant, but they didn't like the restaurant. Now let's make a why not like restaurant question. How would you do that? Why not like, why they not like restaurant? How would you make a why not question? Why not? Why didn't they like? Why didn't they like the restaurant? Why didn't they like the restaurant? And here's the answer. Because the food and the service were horrible. The food and the service were horrible. But we could use the word dreadful because that's what dreadful means. It means horrible. The food and the service were dreadful. The food and the service were dreadful. They didn't like the restaurant because the food and the service were dreadful. Okay, let's practice another time using the word dreadful. Mary was invited to a party. Mary was invited to a party, but she didn't go. She didn't go to the party. Let's make a why not Mary go to party question. How would you make a why not Mary go to party question? Why? Why didn't she? Why didn't she go? Why didn't she go to? Why didn't she go to the? Go to the? Go to the? Why didn't she go to the party? Why didn't she go to the party? Why didn't she go to the party? And here's the reason. She felt very sick. She didn't go to the party because she felt very sick. Or she felt horrible. Sometimes when you're sick, you say, I feel horrible. What is another way to say horrible? She felt dreadful. She didn't go to the party because she felt dreadful. She didn't go to the party because she felt dreadful. Okay, let's just practice one more time using the word dreadful, which means horrible. Here is a situation. Mike and John went to a movie, but they didn't enjoy the movie. Can you make a why not enjoy movie? Why they not enjoy movie? How will you make a question with that? Why not? Why didn't? Why didn't they? Why didn't they enjoy? Why didn't they enjoy the movie? And the reason is the movie was horrible. They didn't enjoy the movie because the movie was horrible. Or what is another word for horrible? Dreadful. They didn't enjoy the movie because the movie was dreadful. They didn't enjoy the movie because the movie was dreadful. All right, so in the story here, the little baby gets dreadful things to eat. So they give the little baby horrible food to eat. Things that you would think could kill an ordinary child. Bits of herring is a type of fish, or apple, or anything else its mother eats. And sometimes even sips of beer or gin. This word sip, it means like a little drink, a little, that's a sip. That's sipping. So a little sip of beer or gin. So they give the baby beer and gin. If it cries, it is joggled or slapped. Ow, I really slapped myself. And as soon as ever it gets able to sit up, it is put down on the pavement among a number of other dirty, untidy children and left to take care of itself. So when it sits up, when it's awake, the mothers put it in the street or on the sidewalk. That's what the pavement means. We've already talked about that word pave or pavement. That's like the sidewalk or the street. With the other dirty children, untidy is similar to dirty. So so the mother just puts the little baby in the street with the other dirty children and left to take care of itself. When a little girl is 7, she is thought quite old enough to look after all of the young ones. And on Saturdays, she goes off with the other little girls. Now, this phrasal verb, to look after someone or something, it means to take care of something, to take responsibility for something, to watch something. So to look after something means that you are responsible for it. You have to watch it. You have to take care of it. So if we have a situation, let's say Mary has 2 younger brothers, and she is responsible for them because both of her parents are working. So sometimes it's very important. Mary is the oldest. She has to watch her 2 younger brothers. She has to watch them. She's responsible for them. What we can say is she looks after her younger brothers. That means that she's responsible for them. She takes care of them. Mary looks after her younger brothers. Where would you put the word normally in that sentence? The sentence is Mary looks after her younger brothers. Where should you put the word normally? Mary normally looks after her younger brothers. She normally looks after her normal she normally looks after her younger brothers. Let's make a when question. When does she? When does she normally? When does she normally? When does she normally look after? When does she normally look after her younger brothers? When does she normally look after her younger brothers? When does she watch them? When does she take care of them? When does she have the responsibility for them? Let's say after school. She normally looks after her younger brothers. She normally looks after her younger brothers after school. All right, let's try another example using take care of, meaning to be responsible for something, to watch something, to take care of something. Here's another situation. John went to the doctor for an examination. The doctor warned John, he must be very careful. He must be more careful. He's very unhealthy. How do you think the doctor would tell him, watch your health, take care of your health, be more responsible for your health, manage your health better, look after his health. He should look after his health. Let's make a how question with that sentence. How should he? How should he? How should he look after? How should he look after his health? After his How should he look after his health? How should he look after his health? Now, many times when someone asks a how question and you want to explain the steps, you can use the preposition by plus an ing verb. By exercising. How look after health? By exercising. How should he look after his health? How? By exercising. How? By eating better food. How? By not smoking. So it's by plus an ing verb. He should look after his health by exercising. So that means he should manage, he should watch, he should take care of his health by exercising. He should look after his health by exercising and eating better food. He should look after his health by exercising and eating better food. He should look after his health by exercising, eating better food, and not smoking. So that's by plus ing verb. All right. So let's see, how do they use it here? When a little girl is 7, she is thought quite old enough to look after all of the younger ones. So when a girl is 7, she has to take responsibility for the younger children. She has to watch them. She has to manage them. And on Saturdays, she goes off with the other little girls, pushing a rickety old perambulator. Okay, wait, let's see. Let's look at the word rickety. I'm going to find a picture of something rickety to show you. Rickety. Oh, okay. This is a pretty good example of rickety. Here's a rickety bridge. I missed that word. I think, too bad I didn't notice that when I was writing these exercises. That would be a fun word to practice. Here's a rickety house. That's a rickety house. Now, they use the word perambulator. I think in modern England they would say pram. But let's do perambulator. Yeah. So it's like a baby carriage, but I think that's a very old-fashioned term. So nobody would say that now. In North America, you would say baby carriage. And in the UK, you probably would say pram, which I think is short for perambulator. So you can see the little girl on Saturday pushing a rickety perambulator. or a wooden cart with perhaps two babies in it and several smaller children hanging onto her skirt. And she goes down the foul street. Foul means like disgusting. She goes down the disgusting street and on until she comes to a tiny little bit of ground where there are seats and some bushes and hard paths, and this is a playground. Just in case you don't know what a playground is, I think maybe it's worth just showing you. I mean, it's a common enough thing, but probably not something that you find very often in an English book. So that's where children go to play, a playground. So the 7-year-old girl takes her little brothers and sisters to a playground. And she walks down the foul, disgusting street. Okay. But what do you think it really has been? A graveyard. So they're saying that the playground where she takes her younger brothers and sisters is actually a graveyard. Let me show you what that is in case you don't know what that is. So really, the playground for the children is a graveyard. And you see these stone things. These are called graves, or gravestones. I wonder why they do that. That's pretty weird. Okay, a graveyard. So she takes her younger brothers and sisters to go play in the graveyard. And there's still graves and big stones showing that people have been buried there long years ago. But the children who play in it do not mind this at all. So the children don't care. They go there and they play and they have fun, and they don't think this is a place where dead people are. They sit on the graves and they think they're very lucky to get this place away from the street. So I guess they go there because it's safer and quieter than playing in the street where there's a lot of noise and a lot of dangerous things. So maybe that makes sense that they would go there to play because nobody will bother them and it's safe. Then the poor little babies are left in their go-karts or perambulators, very often in the sun, with their heads hanging down over the edge, while Liza talks to Bella, and they both put their hair in curl papers and show each other any small things they have picked up in the street. So basically the older girls who are supposed to be watching the babies, they don't really watch them. They sit and talk about whatever thing they want and let the kids do connected. I just got a message that said I got disconnected. Okay, well, it looks like I'm back. I hope I'm back. I'm going to keep reading and pretend I'm back. I don't know if you can see me or hear me. Let's keep going. Okay. So let's see. But they're quite used to it. And if the live doll cries, they just stop talking and rush up to it and push it up and down, or take it out and shake it about for a few minutes and then put it back and go on with their talk. So these girls, they're too young to take care of babies. They don't know how to take care of babies. Sometimes, not often, they have a feast. A feast is like a party with a lot of food. And perhaps Bella brings out a dirty bottle, which she has picked up, and fills it with water at the fountain. And Liza takes from her pocket an apple and some sticky toffee, and puts one of these little one of the little ones. Wait. And perhaps one of the little ones has a bun. A bun is like a piece of bread, like a small piece of bread. And then the apple is rubbed until it shines with a dirty bit of rag called a pocket handkerchief. And they all sit down together in a row and share the things. And even the baby has a hard lump of apple stuffed into its mouth. For Liza and Bella do not mean to be unkind to their babies, for they have mother hearts in them. Well, of course, there are many sorts of children in London besides these. There are the children of working men who are neatly dressed and go out on Sundays with their father and mother. There are chauffeurs, children who live near the garage or in the mews, where rich people keep their motor cars or carriages. It's not easy in London to find room for cars or carriages close to the house, so a number of stables were built together, making a long yard like a street, and the people who lived near kept their carriages there. But there are fewer carriages now, and often the rooms in the mews are empty or used by outside people. While the cars are kept at some big garage a little distance off, there are many others who are not so lucky as chauffeurs or the coachman's children. Think of the little children who belong to the organ grinders. Oh, let me show you what an organ grinder is. In case you don't know. An organ grinder is this. See that instrument? Let's see if we can find, how about this? Maybe you recognize that. That's an organ grinder, that machine. Think of the little children who belong to the organ grinders and who are taken about in a basket tied to the grinding organ with the hideous noise, hideous means horrible, with the hideous noise in their ears all day. I wonder that they can ever hear it all when they grow up. Many, very many of the children have no playground at all, but the street, the pavement. The pavement is like the sidewalk. It can also be the street. But they sit on the doorsteps and breathe in the dust. And all their playthings, if they have any, and even their food, are often thick with dust. So let's look at that word dust for a minute. Here's a good picture of dust. This is dust. So they're saying that there's a lot of dust in the air, and even the dust gets on the food. So the children eat this food, but it's got dust on it. They sit on the doorsteps and breathe in the dust, and all their playthings, if they have any, and even their food, are often thick with dust. I have seen a child rubbing a bit of bread and jam up and down the dirty stone before it eats it. So the author is saying, I've seen a child with some bread and jam rub it on the street and then eat it. Ugh. But the rich children and the poor children do not often meet. For if the rich children go through the streets in the poorer parts, they are in motor cars or cabs. Remember, a cab is a taxi. And in their part of the park, there are not many poor children, while in the parks where the poor children go, you do not find many rich ones. And though there are parts of London where the poor and the rich are very near together, yet their lives never mix, as the lives of country children do. Very often, in the country, a child knows the names of all the other children in its village, and who they are, and all about them. But in London, it is not so, and many rich children grumble all the time if they do not have everything they want. So they get angry if they don't get what they want, and never think of their poor little brothers and sisters, who would snatch eagerly at any of the things that they throw away. Have you ever heard the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who piped, that's like a flute, so wonderfully that he could make anything follow him when he liked, and how he piped so that all the rats ran after him, and he led them to the river where they were drowned. When he asked the mayor and chief men in the town to be paid for what he had done, they laughed and said, "No, now the rats are dead. You can't make them alive again. We've got what we wanted and we won't pay you." So the piper was very angry and piped another tune, and all the children followed him. And he led them on and on toward a great mountain, where a cave opened suddenly, and they all went in and were never seen again. I think if that Pied Piper came to London, he would find very many different sorts of children than ever he found in Hamelin, where out came the children running, all the little boys and girls, with rosy cheeks and flaxen curls and sparkling eyes and teeth like pearls, tripping and skipping, ran merrily after the wonderful music with shouting and laughter. There would be London children whose eyes did not sparkle, and who had almost forgotten to laugh, as well as those like the children of Hamelin, who were so bright and so gay. All right, well, that was chapter 1 of the Children of London, and chapter 2, which we'll do very soon, is just called London, so I wonder what that'll be about. Okay, well, thank you everyone who stayed and watched until the end. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next time when we do chapter 2 of this story of London. Okay, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.